At first glance, the new KTM 790 Adventure and the Honda Transalp 750 have a lot in common. They both retail for around $10,000 US. Both fit solidly into the mid-size adventure bike category at 450 pounds. Both have a TFT display and a full suite of electronics, but after 1,000 miles plus on both bikes, I've discovered a few key differences that most adventure riders are probably going to want to be aware of. This video is sponsored by Quad Lock. We'll talk about that in a minute. Before we jump into the comparison, let's just talk about stats for both of these bikes so you can see just how similar they are on paper. The Transalp retails for $9,999 US. The 790 Adventure is $10,990 US. Both bikes have fuel injection. Both bikes have ride-by-wire throttles. Both have a 6-speed transmission, preload adjustable only suspension. Suspension travel on the Transalp is 7.9 in the front and 7.5 inches in the rear, and on the 790 it is 7.9 inches both front and rear. The seat height on the Transalp is 33.7 inches, and there's a 2-position seat on the 790, so it can be at 33.1 inches or 33.9 inches. Both have front ends that are ugly as hell. The side view of each is not bad if you care about aesthetics. Most of us do a little. They both have this stupid low front fender, which has no place on an adventure bike in my opinion, and both have the industry standard adventure bike 21-inch front wheel, 18-inch rear wheel. That is where the similarities end. Let's talk about some of the significant differences between these two bikes. The Transalp has a 755cc engine, while it is 799 cc's on the 790. Horsepower-wise, the Transalp has 83 horsepower in the US. It's been detuned in the US for some reason, but 90 horsepower in Europe. So outside the US, the difference between these two horsepower-wise is not significant because this 790 has 95 horsepower. In the US, it's kind of significant at 83 to 95 horsepower. Ground clearance on the Transalp is 8.3 inches, and on the 790, it is 9.2 inches. Fuel capacity, 4.5 gallons on the Transalp, 5.3 gallons on the 790. The tires are a significant difference. They are tubed tires, standard stock on the 750. Tubeless tires are standard on the KTM 790 Adventure. It's one of the least expensive bikes you can get with that option in this size range. Electronics-wise, the Transalp has ABS and traction control. It has no cruise control. It does come with a quick shifter standard. So it has 4 ride modes, one of which is a user configurable mode, but there is a big fat asterisk on that because it is not very useful for what most of us are going to want to use it for, which is a dedicated off-road mode, because it doesn't save your settings. You have to manually shut off the ABS and the traction control every single time, even after you've switched into the mode, and that sucks. Electronics-wise, the 790 has a 6-axis IMU with cornering ABS and traction control, one of the least expensive bikes to offer that option. It has available cruise control, an available quick shifter. There is an additional cost for that rally mode, cruise control and quick shifter, and of course there is the horrible debacle that is demo mode on the 790, so you'll have access to those things for the first 1,500 kilometers, then they will shut off and you'll have to pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $800 to get them permanently added to your bike, which brings the total cost of the bike closer to $12,000 US, which is not nothing. So each of these bikes has their strengths. Let's start with what, in my opinion, the Transalp 750 does better. The Transalp is a very good, very comfortable street bike. I'll give it a slight edge there. It is better on the road than the 790, but not by a wide margin. It's an easy to ride bike, but it's very quick when you want it to be. So it's got that beginner-friendly smoothness, but if you really want to get into it, this is a fast bike. You can pass cars all day. Ask me how I know. It's a comfortable bike that I trust implicitly. I would jump on this bike and ride it to Boston and back tomorrow without a second thought. I like the screen and info setup slightly better on the Honda. I like the way that the main screen works. The Honda is much more of a what you see is what you get bike. There are no BS extra fees, no hidden features that get taken away from you after a certain amount of time if you don't pay, and the whole bike is cheaper to begin with. So in that score, it's a better value, or at least a more clear, well-communicated, less sneaky garbage value. It's a more manageable bike and easier to ride. It's way more friendly to a less experienced rider, in my opinion. The 790 does have rain mode, but that's just hamstringing a bike and not using it to its capability, whereas the 750 is a great first adventure bike. It's a great first bike if you're tall enough, but if you're coming from a Honda 500, or maybe you started on a CRF 300L, This is a great transition bike for that. It's very easy to ride and smooth. The 790 is a bike I would be cautious about putting newer riders on. The fuel gauge actually works on the Honda, unlike on the KTM where it only works in the bottom half of the fuel tank. The Honda for some reason comes with self-canceling turn signals standard, which is great, but I'd much rather have had cruise control personally. And then the biggest, obvious, most important advantage of the Honda is Honda reliability and build quality. It cannot be understated. Peace of mind cannot be quantified. This bike is peace of mind personified. The 790 is exactly the opposite. You will constantly be thinking about whether or not it's going to start when you turn the key. You will never worry about that on your Honda. You will get on, you'll turn the key and go. And that peace of mind is a key advantage in the Honda's camp, in my opinion. The 790 has persistent issues. Camshafts shredding themselves, dirt ingestion, fouling cylinders. There's a Facebook group with 10,000 people called KTM 790, 890 camshaft failures. There's no group like that for the Transalp, so just know concerns abound with the 790, real or imagined, but they exist. 750, not so much. I've heard almost nothing about reliability or consistent issues over here. And the Transalp 750 is made in Japan, so if that's important to you, if you don't want to buy a Chinese-made bike, then the choice is clear because the 790 is now made in China by CF Moto. What does the 790 do better? Well, a lot of things. It has that 6-axis IMU. I know I harped on this in the review, but that gives you cornering ABS, that gives you cornering traction control, which is safer and better both on and off the road. It makes the off-road mode a lot more intuitive and useful when you're off-road because it knows when you're leaning, it knows when you're sliding, and you have to pay a lot more money in general to get that level of technology, but they've just copy and pasted the electronics suite from the 890 into the 790, so you're getting a lot of bang for your buck in terms of electronics. The maintenance tasks on the 790 are way easier. The oil drain plugs are a lot easier to get to even with a skid plate on, and don't get me started on the damn air filter which requires removing fairings to lift the tank up on the 750. Now, that's not the deal breaker that people have made it out to be, at least not in my opinion, but it definitely is a pain in the ass. The 750 is a pain in the ass to work on. Just installing the cruise control took me like 2 hours because I had to take every fairing off to get up in there and get it connected. It's a super huge miss in my opinion, where Hondas are normally very easy to work on, but this 790 is a lot easier to work on, do mods and mess with, hands down. I would much rather work on the 790 all day. You get tubeless tires with the 790. You can get cruise control. The aftermarket for the 790 is way better, at least for now, because this bike has been out longer. They did change a little bit in 2023, but a lot of the old mods still work, and companies are racing to come out with new ones all the time. I have not had problems finding mods and accessories for this bike for the 790, whereas with the Transalp, it took them a while to catch up, but there is a lot out now. The 790 is faster and more fun, hands down, and the way the bike is designed with the unique lower center of gravity makes it so much easier off-road riding. It feels lighter than it is. Now, I will say that this Transalp has a similar thing going on where a lot of the weight is low. It feels easy to wheel around in the garage and to put your feet down. This is better than every other bike, or a lot better than a normal bike. The 790 is a whole different animal. It's unbelievably confidence-inspiring off-road as a result, and I haven't ridden anything like it. 790 feels lighter than it is. It feels better to me off-road. It's more confidence-inspiring. It feels more like it was made to go off-road. The 790 has better ground clearance, but not massively. People make a big deal out of that. It's not even an inch. The 790 comes with a factory skid plate, and the Honda doesn't, though the factory skid plate is not amazing on the 790. You don't technically need lower crash bars on the 790 because of the way the tank protects the engine. It's mostly off-road ready from the factory. The 790 has off-road mode, which is brilliant, and I've talked about it time and time again, but I can't believe how intuitive it is. Seems to know what I'm trying to do. I don't ever take it out of off-road mode. I have rally mode unlocked and I never use it because off-road mode knows exactly what I'm trying to do off-road almost entirely 100% of the time. It's much easier to get into off-road mode on the fly. It's still a few button presses on the 790, but the Honda is a huge pain in the ass. It requires you to stop, pull over, go into user mode, use the thumbstick to go over to ABS, hold down the ABS button to turn it off, switch over to traction control, hold down the traction control button, then confirm that you want to turn it off. All of that you have to do every time you want to switch from street riding to off-road riding. It's really not built with a seamless transition to off-road riding in mind, and in my opinion, that kind of belies the intention behind it. They don't really see it as a bike that's being taken on the most difficult off-road stuff. It's more of a gravel road, forest road cruiser, and then if you get into something heinous, you can turn that stuff off. The 790 also has factory charging ports built in, and speaking of charging ports, the thing I use my charging ports the most for is charging my phone. So thanks to Quad Lock for sponsoring this video. I have a full Quad Lock setup on both of these bikes. Let me run you through what that looks like real quick. Here on the Transalp, I have a simple bar mount, quick and easy to install. Just one bolt here, connected to the vibration dampener, which of course protects your phone. And on top of that, I've got the weatherproof wireless charging head. I can mount my phone horizontally or vertically. I can take it on and off the bike quickly and easily, which I do a ton when I'm taking pictures while I'm out riding. Quad Lock has a really cool 360 kit builder that you can use on the website that'll help you figure out exactly what mount, dampener, charger, and any other parts that you need will work best with your bike. Let's take a look at the 790. Here on the 790, I've gone with the bar clamp mount. So this is fully adjustable in multiple positions. Just replaces one of your bar clamp screws. This was like a, I don't know, 5-minute installation. So here's the mount, and I've got it attached, of course, to a vibration dampener. And again, it's the wireless weatherproof charging head, and it's just plugged into the stock charging port on the 790 here. Again, quick and easy to add my phone. I can run it horizontally or vertically on the bike. No concerns about it damaging my camera. And one of the first mods I put on any bike is a Quad Lock. 7 years, tens of thousands of miles, multiple crashes, never a single issue with Quad Locks. I could not recommend them any more wholeheartedly. So having said all that, having looked at the similarities and talked about what each bike does better than the other, who is each of these bikes for? You came to this video because you're trying to decide between them, or you're curious what the differences or defining factors between them is. Let's talk about who I think each bike is for. We'll start with the Transalp. Keep in mind, neither of these bikes are the absolute pinnacle of off-road performance. Neither has adjustable suspension. Obviously, if you're looking at these two bikes, then value is a concern. You want the most bang for your limited buck. Let's talk about what the 750 does better with that in mind. I would say the Transalp is a great 70-30 bike. That's 70% on-road, 30% off-road. It's one of the best touring bikes for the money, very comfortable on the road, but lightweight and easy to handle for beginners and intermediate riders. And you can cruise on it all day with no problems. It's very comfortable. You have zero reliability concerns with the Honda. Absolute peace of mind, no sleepless nights, no sleeping in camp, worrying about whether or not this thing is gonna start. Is that an intangible quality? Yes. Is it also invaluable? I would say so. This thing is kind of, to me, like a baby GS. Now, I know the GS is plenty capable off-road in the hands of the right person, but for me, that's a bike I would like to have on the highway because it's very comfortable, and then know that if I need to hit some gravel and more difficult stuff when I get where I'm going, it can also do it, but wouldn't be the absolute best choice, but the comfort on the road makes up for it. That is what this Transalp feels like to me. If you want to ride across the country tomorrow and don't want to think about having issues, this is the bike. Though lack of cruise control on the Transalp is a knock, but thankfully there are aftermarket options like the Viridian cruise control that I've added. It is complicated to install, but it does a great job once you get it in there and really shores up one of the biggest weaknesses of this bike if you're going to be on the road for long periods of time. If you need to ride long distances to get to where you'll camp and also want to be confident tackling some gravel roads when you get there, this is the bike. If you're a newer rider with a street bias but you want to dip your toes into off-road riding, the Honda is the bike. If longevity and resale value are a concern, go Honda. If you want to learn on it and get better and eventually upgrade without losing much money because you want a bike that holds its value, go with the Honda. If Chinese manufacturing is a concern to you, if you cannot fathom or stomach buying a motorcycle made in China, then the Honda is the obvious choice. These are still manufactured in Japan. The Transalp is more reliable, easier to ride, and slightly better on the road. If your off-road riding is not going to include anything tougher than a washed-out forest road, it'll do just fine. The Transalp would not be my first choice, but I would run the Oregon BDR or the Washington BDR on this bike and feel confident knowing I'm going to get through just about anything either of those two routes has to throw at me, including the sandy sections and the washouts, and yes, even Baby Head Hill. I would feel confident doing them on this bike. Much has been made of the disadvantages of like the low ground clearance, but it is not that different. We're talking 5% different than most of the other mid-range adventure bikes that people would not hesitate to do harder stuff on. So more comfortable street bike, not my first choice for off-road, but it sure isn't my last either. Now, who is the 790 Adventure for? If you want the absolute most capability for the money and you only have $11,000 to spend, you cannot beat this bike. You'd have to pay $15,000 plus to get even the electronics suite that this bike has in another model. If the Transalp is a 70-30 bike, more road biased, I would say the 790 is more of a pure 50-50. It's very capable in both places. Comfortable and capable enough on the road, and confidence inspiring when you leave it. Capable of taking on the tough stuff despite lack lack of adjustable suspension. I've been very impressed with this stock suspension. The Transalp suspension isn't bad. It's a Showa setup and it's impressed me in multiple situations, but out of the box, I would say that the 790 suspension is better for off-road riding. If you want the most bells and whistles like cruise, quick shifter, or the customizability of rally mode, the ability to set all the various settings on the bike to exactly your liking, the 790 does a better job of that. If you're willing to put up with potential annoying issues and or lack of peace of mind in favor of the most possible performance for your money, it is hard to beat, and I would say nearly impossible to beat, this KTM 790 Adventure for the money. But if you're a new rider, I would not recommend this bike to you. If you're a newer rider, if you are not someone who has a couple years of adventure bike riding or off-road riding experience, I'm not sure I would recommend this bike to you. Yes, you could put it in rain mode, but why hamstring the bike and not ride it to its potential as you learn when you could just get a bike like this for cheaper and sell it for almost what you paid and learn on it? That's my 2 cents. If all things were equal and reliability was not a concern, there is no universe in which you would take the Honda over the KTM, unless you're just a newer rider and this KTM is too powerful or twitchy for you. But we don't live in a perfect universe, and reliability and dependability and build quality are massive concerns, particularly for adventure riding, because we often hop on these bikes and go thousands of miles from home, or hundreds of miles or 50 miles from a major highway, and we need to know that the dang thing is going to work when we need it to. Peace of mind is not quantifiable, like I said, but if you want it, you need to go Honda. The KTM, unfortunately, just has question marks. They may be true, they may not be, but for me personally, it's not something that I can just forget about and hope for the best. It's something I'm always thinking about and trying to be prepared for out on the road. Only you can decide if the extra performance of the KTM is worth the slightly elevated cost and greatly elevated anxiety that comes with buying it. For what it's worth, I love both bikes and can wholeheartedly recommend each of them. Just be aware of the unique disadvantages of each before you buy. If it helps, I'm going on the Northern California BDR in a couple weeks, and I am taking the KTM 790 Adventure, even though I have a 12-hour road ride to get to the beginning of the route. So take from that what you will. My advice, as always, is to test ride both, see which one fits you, see which one feels right, especially if you're on the fence or wavering between the two. That can sometimes make all the difference. And don't just take the opinion of some random fat guy on the internet. Definitely do your research, read from some sources, and most importantly, get some personal experience with each bike. If you're interested in more dual sport and adventure bike reviews, dual sport and adventure riding content, and moto camping stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel, because I'm the dork on the road and I want to be your internet riding buddy, and I'm better than your regular riding buddies because I come with a mute button. Thank you for watching, and please do not forget to be excellent to each other. Thank you.